"Father," he began, "mother, I have seen the truth that hides behind riches. I have lived in gold, but my heart has slept in darkness. I will no longer chase after wealth. I will walk the path of peace, the path of the spirit." For a moment, silence sat in the hall like a visitor no one invited. Then Chief Umuikpe struck the table so hard that the glasses trembled. "Have you lost your senses, Obinna?" he thundered. "Do you know how many men would kill to wear your shoes? How many fathers would give their right hand to have a son like you?" Obinna bowed his head, his voice soft but steady. "Maybe that is why I choose to walk barefoot." At that, his mother, Madame Chinyer, let out a cry that could melt stone. She rushed to him. "Billionaire's only son abandons his wealth to live in poverty as a monk." In the great town of Umwagu, where riches flowed like palm oil at harvest, there lived a mighty man named Chief Umuikpe. His wealth was said to have roots that reached the belly of the earth. His lorries rumbled across the nation, his name opened doors in high places, and his mansion sat upon the hill like a small kingdom. The walls of his house shone like the back of a new brass gong, and the gates were plated with gold so bright that even the sun envied their glow. Every morning, servants lined up like soldiers, bowing as Chief Umuikpe's only son, Obinna, walked past. The boy's shoes were polished till they mirrored his own face. The cooks prepared 10 dishes where one would have been enough. And his mother wrapped him in the finest silks from distant lands. When Obinna sneezed, a servant ran for tissues, when he sighed, another brought water. Truly, he was the child of comfort, the prince of plenty, and the pride of Umwagu. Even the elders would say, "Ah, fortunate is the child who was born into Chief Umuikpe's house, his tears fall on silk pillows." And the drummers sang, "Obinna, son of wealth. He walks and the ground trembles." Obinna grew like the young Irako, tall, handsome, and full of promise. From the day he first spoke, people said his tongue carried wisdom beyond his years. He was the only son of Chief Umuikpe, and all eyes watched him the way farmers watch the first rain of the season. He studied in fine schools where the walls smelled of chalk and perfume, not dust. His teachers praised him, his father boasted of him, and his mother prayed that one day he would sit on his father's throne of business. Wherever Obinna went, people bowed and whispered, "That is the future of Umwagu." When he returned home on holidays, cars formed a long line before his family gate. Friends and admirers came with wine and laughter, praising his father's wealth and his own bright future. At night, music filled the air, drums, flutes, and laughter that rolled into the sky like thunder. In the middle of those loud gatherings, Obinna's eyes would drift away. He smiled, yes, but his heart did not follow. While others saw gold around him, he began to feel the weight of those golden chains. They called him the heir of abundance, yet in his quiet moments, Obinna would ask himself, "If the whole world already expects me to be great, where will I find my own path?" Though Obinna had everything his eyes could see, there was a silence that followed him like a shadow. In the morning, when the sun painted the sky gold, he would stand at the balcony of his father's mansion, watching the town below. He saw traders shouting prices, children running after kites made of old paper, and farmers returning with baskets of yam. Their lives looked ordinary, yet something in their faces glowed brighter than all his father's diamonds. Sometimes, at night, when the house was quiet and the servants had gone to rest, Obinna would walk through the long corridors alone. The air smelled of polished floors and foreign perfume, but there was no warmth in it. His footsteps echoed, and he wondered, can a man live in a palace and still feel like a prisoner? He stopped attending the parties he once enjoyed. The music that used to make him dance now sounded empty, like a drum with a broken skin. Even his friends noticed and teased him, saying, "Heir of abundance, your laughter is running away from you." But they did not understand. How could they? They thought wealth was life itself. Obinna began to spend more time under the palm tree behind the mansion. There, he would sit for hours, watching birds fly freely into the sky. Sometimes he whispered to them, "Tell me, little ones, how does it feel to be free?" One evening, as the sky bled orange and the birds called their young ones home, Obinna sat again beneath the palm tree. His thoughts were heavy like wet clothes. Just then, an old man appeared on the dusty path. His wrapper was torn, his walking stick was thin, and his eyes held the calm of deep rivers. The beggar paused before Obinna and said, "My son, may I rest my bones under this tree?" Obinna nodded and offered him water from a silver flask. The old man drank slowly, then smiled and said, "You are generous, young master. But tell me, do you own the joy that should follow your kindness?" Obinna was silent. He had never heard anyone speak like that before. The old man leaned closer and whispered, "Not all treasures shine, my son. Some treasures are felt only when you have lost everything that glitters." Then, just as gently as he came, he rose and walked away, leaving footprints that faded into the evening dust. That night, Obinna could not sleep. The man's words echoed in his mind like a talking drum. Not all treasures shine. He tossed and turned until dawn, feeling a strange pull deep within, a call not from the world outside, but from the quiet place inside his chest. Days passed, and the whisper grew louder. He dreamed of walking barefoot on a long, quiet road. No cars. No servants. Just the sound of birds and his own heartbeat. In that dream, he felt lighter than air, freer than the wind. When he woke, he looked around his golden room, the curtains heavy, the walls glittering, the air cold, and for the first time, he felt that all the beauty around him was a cage. The elders say, when a man begins to see gold as dust, his spirit is already on the journey to truth. And so, Obinna's heart began to turn toward a new path, a path no riches could buy, and no servant could walk for him. It happened on a quiet morning when the cock crowed, not once, not twice, but thrice. The air was still, and even the wind seemed to be listening. Obinna woke before the servants stirred, before the cooks lit their fires. His chest felt heavy, yet his spirit felt light, as though something unseen had entered his room. He rose from his bed and walked to the window. Outside, the world looked peaceful, the mist sat gently on the grass, and the first rays of sunlight touched the mansion like gold dust. But deep inside him, a strange whisper began to speak, not with words, but with truth. The air before him shimmered softly, and out of it appeared an old man with calm eyes, his robe white as moonlight. Some say it was the spirit of stillwaters, guardian of restless souls. Others say it was the ghost of a forgotten monk who once lived in the hills beyond Umwagu. Whatever he was, his voice flowed like a slow river. "Obinna," the spirit said, "you are rich in things, but poor in soul. You sleep on silk, yet your heart lies on stones. The world has crowned you with gold, but peace has not found your head." Obinna trembled and fell to his knees. "Who are you?" he whispered. The spirit smiled gently. "I am a messenger from the quiet world, the place where men learn that the body owns nothing and the heart owns all. You have been called, Obinna. The time has come to choose between gold that fades and truth that stays." As the spirit's form slowly faded into the morning light, Obinna felt warm tears roll down his face. His chest ached, not from pain, but from awakening. He looked around his golden room, the silk curtains, the jeweled lamps, the walls that had never known silence, and for the first time, he saw them not as blessings, but as chains. He pressed his hand to his heart and whispered, "If this is my call, then let it be so." And from that dawn onward, Obinna knew his life would never again belong to wealth. The morning after the vision, Obinna called his parents to the great dining hall. The table before them was long enough to seat 20 men, covered with dishes that smelled of pepper soup and roasted goat. Yet Obinna touched none of it. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with a new kind of fire. "Father," he began, "Mother, I have seen the truth that hides behind riches. I have lived in gold, but my heart has slept in darkness. I will no longer chase after wealth. I will walk the path of peace, the path of the spirit." For a moment, silence sat in the hall like a visitor no one invited. Then Chief Umuikpe struck the table so hard that the glasses trembled. "Have you lost your senses, Obinna?" he thundered. "Do you know how many men would kill to wear your shoes? How many fathers would give their right hand to have a son like you?" Obinna bowed his head, his voice soft but steady. "Maybe that is why I choose to walk barefoot." At that, his mother, Madame Chinyere, let out a cry that could melt stone. She rushed to him, holding his face in her trembling hands. "My son, don't speak such words. People will laugh at us. What will become of our name? What will happen to your father's empire?" Obinna gently took her hands and placed them over his heart. "Mama, you and Papa gave me life. But peace is something I must give myself." The chief rose from his chair, his eyes red with anger. "You are bewitched," he shouted. "No son of mine will abandon his inheritance to chase shadows. If you walk out that door, Obinna, you walk away from this family." Obinna looked at his father one last time and said quietly, "Then, Father, may your riches live long, but let my soul find its own home." He turned and walked away, leaving the echoes of his footsteps behind, while the walls of the mansion swallowed his father's roar and his mother's weeping. That night, the servants whispered in corners, saying, "The heir has gone mad," while others murmured, "No, perhaps he has finally woken up." Before the first rooster crowed, the moon still sat high in the sky like a lonely lantern. Obinna woke quietly, his heart steady like a drum that had found its rhythm. He opened his wardrobe one last time, rows of clothes from foreign lands, shoes that had never touched dust, and perfumes that smelled like distant gardens. He smiled faintly and whispered, "I have worn too much of the world, now I will wear simplicity." He dressed in a plain white cloth, tied it around his waist, and looked at his reflection in the mirror. For the first time, he did not see the heir of Chief Umuikpe. He saw a man, ordinary, bare, and free. Before he left, he walked into his father's study. The room smelled of cigar smoke and leather, the scent of power. On the big mahogany table lay documents worth more than some villages. Obinna placed his gold wristwatch beside them, then removed the chain from his neck and his father's signet ring from his finger. The sound of the ring hitting the table echoed softly, like the closing of a long story. He stepped into the courtyard. The guards, still drowsy from sleep, looked at him with wide eyes. "Oga Obinna, are you traveling?" one asked timidly. Obinna smiled. "Yes," he said, "but not to where feet usually go." He walked barefoot through the grand gate that had always opened for convoys of cars. The cool earth kissed his soles, and the morning dew brushed his ankles. Behind him, the mansion loomed tall and proud, but Obinna did not look back, for a man who looks back at gold may never find peace. As he reached the road, the first light of dawn broke through the clouds, painting his path in soft gold. Birds sang from the trees, welcoming the son who had finally come home, not to a house, but to himself. The villagers who saw him that morning would later tell the tale. "We saw the heir of wealth walking barefoot, smiling as if he carried the whole sky in his hair." And so, Obinna began his journey into the unknown, leaving behind the noise of wealth to follow the whisper of his soul. The road before him was no longer marble but red earth that stained his fine slippers. Before long, he removed them, feeling the sting of hot sand on his soft feet. The world beyond his father's mansion was not painted with gold. It smelled of smoke, sweat, and survival. At the first market he entered, Obinna saw women with babies tied to their backs, shouting prices that made no sense to him. He pointed to a bowl of gari and asked, "How much does this food of the common people cost?" The women laughed, some out of pity, others out of disbelief. "Fine boy, your tongue is too clean for this market," one said. Another teased, "Your hands have never known firewood smoke." Ashamed, Obinna stood silent, the weight of his ignorance pressing heavier than any gold chain. Then, he saw an old beggar who raised a wrinkled hand and called him. The beggar's mat was torn, and his bowl almost empty. Yet when Obinna came closer, the man smiled and offered him a handful of gari soaked in rainwater. "Eat, my son," the beggar said, his eyes bright like morning stars. Only an empty hand can truly receive. Obinna knelt and ate. The grains were coarse, tasteless, yet sweeter than the finest feast he had ever known. For the first time, he understood hunger. For the first time, he felt human. That night, as he lay under the open sky, the stars mocked his silk heart that was learning to breathe dust. The prince was gone. In his place, a wanderer had begun to rise. After many days of walking through paths that twisted like old tales, Obinna reached a small village hidden between two gentle hills. The place was called Umuikpe, a land the rich had forgotten but the spirits remembered. Here, houses were built with mud and laughter, and people wore their joy like clothes, plain but strong. At first, the villagers watched Obinna with wary eyes. His skin was still too smooth, his voice too polished, and his steps too proud. But hunger humbles even a prince. He went to the stream one morning to fetch water, and the calabash slipped from his hand, spilling into the current. A young woman named Ngozi laughed softly and said, "City boy, even the water knows you are new here." Instead of frowning, Obinna laughed too, a real laugh, not the shallow one he used to give at rich men's parties. From that day, Ngozi taught him the rhythm of the village. He learned to fetch water before sunrise, to eat cassava without complaint, and to roast yam on open fire without burning it black. The children began to follow him everywhere, calling him Brother Obi. They played tricks on him, hiding his slippers or painting his face with white chalk. But when he told them stories of the big city and the talking machines called cars, their eyes widened like full moons. In their laughter, Obinna felt something stir, a warmth that gold had never given him. At night, he sat by the fireside with the elders. They told tales of hunters and spirits, of love and wisdom that money could not buy. The smell of roasted corn mixed with the night wind, and Obinna realized that peace did not live in mansions, it lived here, in small huts filled with songs. One evening, when the sun melted into orange and the air sang with crickets, Ngozi asked him, "Brother Obi, what did you leave behind in that city of gold?" He looked at her for a long time before replying, "Everything I thought mattered, but nothing that truly does." And from that day, Obinna's laughter became the loudest in Umuik. He was no longer the son of Chief Umuikpe, he was one of the people, a man who found riches in the dust. The season of rains came like a drummer gone wild, pounding the roofs, shaking the trees, and washing away the old dust of the earth. The villagers of Umuik ran about covering yam barns and tying roofs with palm fronds. Obinna, who once had servants to hold his umbrella, now stood knee-deep in muddy water, helping to save a leaking hut. That night, when the wind howled like an angry spirit, the rain broke through the thatch above him. He had no silk sheets, no warm blankets, only a thin raffia mat and the cold breath of night. His body trembled, but his heart felt strangely alive. For the first time, he was not afraid to be small. As the storm roared on, Obinna heard the cry of a child, sharp and frightened. He rushed out barefoot into the rain and found Ngozi's younger brother trapped under a fallen branch near the stream. Without thinking, Obinna lifted the branch with bleeding hands and carried the boy back home through the flood. The next morning, the village gathered. The elders praised his courage, and Ngozi's mother said, "Riches did not make you a man. This night did." The words sank deep into Obinna's heart. He sat by the fire that evening, staring into the glowing embers as the rain softened outside. Then, an old monk who often visited the village from a nearby shrine came and sat beside him. His voice was soft, like a leaf touching water. "My son," the monk said, "the storm comes to every roof, even those covered with gold. But it is in the storm that a man learns what he is made of." Obinna bowed his head. He finally understood that wealth had never been his prison, pride was. The storm had broken it open. From that day, he worked harder than ever, teaching the village children to read, helping elders rebuild their huts, and visiting the sick with calabashes of soup. He no longer counted what he owned, but how much good his hands could do. And when the next rain came, Obinna didn't hide. He stood under the open sky, letting the drops wash over him, laughing, free, and reborn. The rains ended, and the earth of Umuik began to breathe again. The trees stood greener, the sky bluer, and the air smelled of renewal. In that calm season, Obinna's spirit also began to settle, like muddy water that clears after the storm. Each dawn, he rose before the cock crowed, walked barefoot to the stream called Isi Miri Udo, head of the still waters. The villagers said the stream was sacred, that the spirits of peace lived beneath its surface. Obinna would kneel there, watching his reflection tremble and fade, and whisper, "I am no longer the son of riches. I am the son of silence." At first, the villagers thought he was losing his mind. Chief Umuikpe's heir, now a man who spoke to water and walked alone into the forest. But soon, they began to see something different, a quiet strength in his eyes, a light that did not come from gold but from calm. Children began to follow him to the stream. Elders came to ask for counsel. Even travelers passing through Umuik stopped to hear him speak. Obinna no longer sought to be served, he sought to serve. He tilled the land with the farmers, fetched firewood for widows, and taught boys and girls to write their names in the sand before the tide washed it away. "Let the world know you were here," he told them, "but let humility wash away your pride." One afternoon, as he sat beneath the great Uda tree, Ngozi came to him. Her voice was soft like wind through grass. "Brother Obi, they now call you the man of still waters. What do you see when you stare into the stream every morning?" Obinna smiled faintly. "I see the face of a boy who once thought gold could fill the soul. But now, I see a man who knows that peace is the only true inheritance." Years passed, and tales of Obinna spread beyond Umuik. Merchants whispered about the young heir who gave away his fortune to live as a monk. Travelers carried his story across villages and markets. Some came searching for him, hoping to learn the secret of his peace. When asked why he left the world of wealth, Obinna would simply say, "Because silence spoke to me louder than money ever did." And so, in the land where riches once flowed like river oil, a new kind of wealth began to grow, the wealth of kindness, of wisdom, of still waters. Even today, the elders of Umuik tell their grandchildren, "If your heart ever becomes too noisy, go and sit by the stream of Obinna. For there, the water still remembers the boy who traded gold for peace." The sun rose gently over Umuik, pouring its golden fingers across the hills like a blessing. The village that was once forgotten by traders and travelers had now become a place people whispered about with wonder. They called it the village where hearts rest. Word of Obinna, the monk who had once been a prince of wealth, spread far and wide. Traders passing through the markets of Onitsha and Nsukka spoke of him as if speaking of a mystery. He was born among kings, they said, but now he lives among the humble, and yet, he smiles more than the kings. Soon, visitors began to arrive, scholars who had read many books but still felt empty, chiefs whose hearts had grown heavy with greed, and even young men tired of chasing a future that always ran ahead of them. They came to the village not for gold, but for peace. Obinna never called himself a teacher, yet people learned just by being near him. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried the weight of mountains. He would sit by the stream of still waters, his voice low and steady like a flute in the evening breeze, and say, "Gold can buy your bed, but not your sleep. Power can silence others, but not your own fears." Children would gather around him, sitting cross-legged, their eyes wide. He would tell them stories, of the proud lion who lost his roar because he refused to listen, and of the farmer who found peace only after sharing his last yam. The laughter of the children mixed with the soft hum of the stream, and even the birds seemed to pause to listen. Under Obinna's quiet example, the people of Umuikpe began to change. Quarrels reduced. Neighbors shared what little they had. The market women stopped measuring profit only by coins but also by the smiles of their customers. Even the elders began to say, "A man may wear torn clothes and still be dressed in peace." One moonlit evening, the villagers decided to build a small gathering place near the stream, a round hut with open sides and a roof woven from palm fronds. They called it Obinna's Rest. There, people would come to meditate, sing soft songs, or sit in silence while the sound of water filled the air. No matter who came, rich or poor, young or old, Obinna welcomed all the same way, with quiet eyes and a smile that seemed to say, "You are enough." And so, peace spread from his heart into every corner of Umuikpe. The villagers no longer chased wealth or envied others. They had discovered a richer treasure, the peace that lives in giving, listening, and letting go. In time, even travelers began to say, "When the noise of the world grows too loud, go to Umuikpe." There, a man once found still waters, and left behind an ocean of calm. Many seasons passed. The mighty chief Umuikpe, once the lion of business and master of wealth, had grown old. His hair had turned the color of ash, and his proud eyes had dimmed like dying lamps. Though his mansion still glittered and his servants still bowed, his nights were long and sleepless. He had everything, but peace had left him. Often, he sat alone in his wide compound, staring at the empty chair where his son, Obinna, once sat. The echoes of their last quarrel haunted him like restless drums. "Do you know how many men would kill to wear your shoes?" he had shouted that day. But now, he would give all his riches just to see those shoes again, dusty and worn on his son's feet. One evening, as the sun bent low behind the palm trees, a trader from the east came to visit. He brought with him tales from distant villages. While sipping palm wine, he said, "There is a man in Umuikpe, a monk they call the man of still waters. It is said he can calm a heart without medicine, and his words carry healing." Chief Umuikpe leaned forward. Something in his spirit stirred. "Still waters," he repeated softly, the name pulling on an old memory like a forgotten song. That night, for the first time in years, he dreamed of his son, barefoot, smiling, standing by a quiet stream. When dawn came, the old chief made a decision that surprised everyone. He told his guards, "Prepare no cars, no gifts, no escorts. I must travel as a man, not as a title." And so, he journeyed to Umuikpe with only a walking stick and a heart heavy with regret. When he arrived, he found a place alive with laughter and peace. The children were chasing butterflies, women were singing as they pounded yam, and men greeted each other with warmth. It was a different world, one untouched by greed. By the stream, under the same great udu tree, sat a man in a simple robe, his hands clasped in calm. His eyes were deep, not from sadness, but from knowing. Chief Umuikpe's breath caught in his chest. "Obinna, my son," he whispered. The monk turned, and their eyes met, one filled with tears of repentance, the other with gentle forgiveness. Chief Umuikpe fell to his knees, his voice trembling. "My son, I built kingdoms of stone, but lost the kingdom of my own house." Obinna reached out, lifted his father's face, and said softly, "Father, no kingdom is ever lost. It only waits to be found again, in love." The villagers watched in silence as the two men embraced. The stream beside them murmured softly, as if blessing the moment. That evening, the father and son sat by the fire, sharing roasted yam and laughter, no gold between them, only peace. Before leaving Umuikpe, Chief Umuikpe said to the villagers, "I came here searching for wisdom, but I found my son, and in him, I found both." He returned home a changed man. The mansion still shone, but he now opened its doors to the poor. He started a foundation that gave scholarships to orphans, calling it the House of Still Waters. And from that day till his last, Chief Umuikpe told anyone who cared to listen, "Wealth is not what fills your house, it is what fills your heart." Years drifted by like gentle clouds over the hills of Umuikpe. The once young Obinna grew into an old man, his hair silver like moonlight, his face calm like morning dew. Though time had softened his body, his spirit remained bright, the kind of brightness that comes not from wealth, but from peace. He still rose before dawn to visit Miri Udo, the stream of still waters. There, he would sit quietly, watching the world awaken, the birds calling to the sunrise, the fish stirring beneath the clear surface, and the wind whispering through the palms. Villagers often found him there, eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. One evening, when the sky blushed red and gold, Obinna gathered the people of Umuikpe beneath the great Udu tree. Children sat cross-legged, women hummed softly, and the elders leaned on their staffs. The air carried the smell of roasted maize and evening rain. Obinna spoke slowly, his voice carrying the calm weight of years. "My people," he said, "the heart of man is like water, it takes the shape of whatever vessel it is poured into. Some choose gold, some choose pride. But if you pour your heart into peace, it will flow forever." Then he smiled, that quiet smile everyone knew. "When I am gone, do not build a statue for me. Let the water and your kindness keep my name alive." That night, the moon shone full over the village, and Obinna, the boy who once turned away from 1,000,000,000 coins, took his final rest beneath the Udu tree. His face, even in death, wore a small, knowing smile, as if he had just whispered a secret to the wind. The next morning, the villagers discovered something wondrous. From the spot where Obinna had been buried, a small spring had begun to flow, cool, clear, and constant. They named it Miri Obinna, Obinna's water. It never dried, not even in the hottest seasons. They said whoever drank from it felt a calm that words could not describe. Travelers began to visit from distant lands, not to seek miracles of gold or healing of body, but to find rest for the soul. Even chiefs and rich men came quietly, kneeling by the spring, washing their hands, whispering, "May I learn to let go." And so, the boy who once ran from riches left behind a treasure greater than any inheritance, a legacy of peace. Generations later, when the elders of Umuikpe gather their grandchildren around the fire, they still tell his story. Once, there was a prince of wealth who became a servant of peace. He built no palace, yet his name stands taller than kings. For when he emptied his hands of gold, the gods filled them with still waters. And the children always ask, "Grandfather, does the water still flow?" The elders smile and nod toward the stream glimmering under the moon. "Yes," they say, "and as long as men remember that peace is greater than gold, it always will."